Attack on Titan has a lot going on. There are so many layers to this story that most of them are not even visible until you're specifically searching for them. This makes understanding the deeper thematic core of the story into a mystery hunt of its own, with the puzzle pieces scattered throughout. You gain a completely new understanding of the show as you gradually peel through each of these layers, noticing the smallest of details, dialogues, minute character expressions, and constantly arrange and rearrange the information until it all fits together. I would like to mention that what I'm talking about here isn't the foreshadowing done in regards to the identities of certain characters or the overarching mystery. Isayama has a certain writing style. He has built AOT in a way where every aspect of the story, every character, their thematic philosophies, every single thing is in thematic unison. So a scene that seems pretty straightforward at first gradually gets thickened and multi-layered the more you consume the story. And the more you watch, the thicker it gets. It is genuinely a one-of-a-kind experience to try and understand every single nuance of the story, making some progress and then marveling about how smart the author must have been to think this all through before getting sucked into your research again. And through experiencing that cycle many times, I noticed and eventually reached an interesting conclusion. That pretty much every single scene in this show either runs analogous to or is built around the character arc that our main character, Eren Jaeger, goes through. And those scenes in turn help in building the true picture of Eren's character.
戦え。それでも前に進まなきゃいけない。
During the mission to retake Trust, we see several soldiers putting themselves in danger, countless sacrificing their lives, all in order to protect Eren as he carries the boulder towards the Trust gate. Every soldier that sacrificed himself to support Eren believed it to be the only choice they had to be able to protect the things that were precious to them. All they could do was push all their hopes onto Eren and count on him. And literally burdened by the weight of all those expectations, Eren pushes forward, shoulders those hopes, and plugs the wall. The interesting part is that this small sequence lays the groundwork for the major themes that, moving forward, drive Eren's overarching character arc. This is the first time in the story where he forces himself to fight for mankind. After all, he's responsible to carry the burden of being humanity's only hope. And amidst this, he loses a sight of where his own goals lie. So his story arc is parallel to Ymir's. Or wait, it's parallel to Reiner's. Historia's? Well, the concept of regret also influences his mentality a lot, so his story arc definitely connects with Levi's, and his self-hate also plays some role in the overarching idea of freedom, so also count in Keith? Sasha? Maybe Kenny? Learning to expand his worldview, much like Gabi, his nature to retaliate and overcoming fear, like Grisha and Irvin. Eren's character is essentially derived from the stories of other characters in the show. He's the point where every single one of these themes and character arcs converge at. He is the coordinate. We'll come back to this. For now, let's take a look at the cannonball scene from episode 9 of season 1. Eren finds himself with Mikasa and Armin, surrounded by the soldiers from the garrison. And no matter what he says, how much he tries to prove himself harmless, the fear-stricken soldiers don't trust him. Even after Eren clearly claims to be a human, the garrison head simply says, "Don't think badly of me, I have no choice," as he orders for the cannonballs to be fired. And as Mikasa tries to make an escape with Eren takes the matter into his own hands as he turns into a Titan.
ミカサやアルミン、みんなを救いたいなら、お前はこの力を支配しなくてはならない。
Am I delusional, or do the parallels I see really exist? People struck by fear attack another human just because he has the capability to turn into a Titan. And Eren realizes that to be able to protect Mikasa and Armin, he is left with no choice but to change into a monster. And it goes even further. In the extra time he gains from the smokescreen, Eren is forced to make a choice. Either he's gonna trust in Armin and let him convince the fear-stricken crowd, or he is, as he says, gonna go solo. A recurring motif in Attack on Titan is that of a choice. I consider it to be one of the major parts of the overall thematic core of AOT. Take it as something like the first chapter of Berries' textbook of Advanced Understanding of Attack on Titan Syllabus 2. Later in the Female Titan arc, Eren is forced to make a choice again. Don't worry, I'm just trying to quickly touch these topics for some familiarity. He once again has to choose between counting on his Nakama or trusting in his own power. And once again, Eren chooses the former and lets the Levi squad handle the Female Titan. And once more, the results were not in his favor. And this is when the fear of regret starts to root itself in his mind, as he starts to second guess himself so that he can avoid making the wrong choice, as regrets slowly start breaking his confidence.
俺にはわからない。ずっとそうだ。自分の力を信じても、信頼に至る仲間の選択を信じても、結果は誰にもわからなかった。
Most people don't even have a choice to begin with. They are mere bystanders who can only stand and watch. By not having a choice, I mean they lack the power to bring any sort of change. They merely act because they are pushed by their environments. Most people act because they are pushed by something that isn't their choice. Not something they can control, but instead it is either the world around them or someone else who applies that push. Early Eren is pretty much defined by his frustration of being controlled by the world around him, being weak and unable to bring any change or save anyone. This feeling of powerlessness has had a large impact on his ideology even later down the line. He talks his heart to Falco after seeing him feel incompetent against Gabi, when he sees him feeling powerless. He yells at Hanji, asking her what she could possibly do to stop him from escaping, reminding her of her incapability to do anything. But making a choice is difficult too. When you make a choice, you have to stand up and take responsibility for the outcome. Nobody would choose to go into war if they knew what they would end up going through. The result of a choice is always a mystery. Yet you have to take responsibility. You have to! So, if not being able to make a choice is frustrating, and making a choice calls for shouldering the responsibilities of an ambiguous outcome, well then, funny to say it, but trying to have no regrets about your decisions is the only choice you are left with. This is the theme that drives the character of Levi. The weight of a choice, living with consequences, and having no regrets. He is pretty much the face of the series when it comes to really difficult character choices. And what we explore with Levi echoes with every other choice in the series. In the No Regrets OVA, Levi is offered a chance to live outside the underground in exchange for killing Erwin. He is told that no matter if he accepts the job or not, the target would be coming after him. Yet, Levi decides to take up the job only if he is attacked by Erwin. He will get his hands dirty only if the target pushes him first. He is afraid of making the wrong choice. I'm definitely going to be called delusional in the comment section, so fuck it! Levi's situation also metaphorically mirrors the current conflict between Paradis and Marley. A chance to live outside in exchange for doing something inhumane. And no matter if they choose to do it or not, the enemy will surely attack them. And they still don't know what the correct choice is. If only I didn't have a choice to make, I would have done the correct thing. If you don't really have any other choice to begin with, then whatever you do wouldn't be your fault. Whatever you do would be correct. The one in the wrong would be the thing that forced you to act and left you with no choice in the first place. Wrong and cruel would be the world itself. Grisha is first driven by his hatred for Marley. But by the end of the basement reveal flashback, all that he is left with are his sins. The reason Owl chose Grisha in the first place was because he went outside the walls, because he refused to be confined by the world around him, and because he had the strength to make a choice. He didn't care about whether his choice was right or not. Sins are enough. Those sins alone are sufficient to drive Grisha because they came as a result of his own choice. What drove Grisha wasn't something he had no choice in, but a direct result of his decisions that he has to take responsibility for, until he gets what he deserves. Until death. Even after death. Until then, he has to keep pushing forward.
お前は妹を連れて壁の外に出た日から、その行いが報われる日まで進み続けるんだ。死んでも、死んだ後も。
So, hopefully by now you're starting to get the basic idea of what the concept of choice means for the story and how it has been integrated into the multiple character arcs with the help of some clever writing. But what brings these character arcs together and gives some tangible meaning to this style of writing, other than just some sneaky foreshadowing, is the character of Eren Jaeger. One of the most important scenes in Eren's development is his breakdown at the race chapel. Yeah, the one where Rod tries to inject Historia with some serum while Eren is telling her to eat him. At this point in the story, a major driving force for Eren is his want to be special. To push forward, he had to be drunk on the belief that he is humanity's savior. This driving force had been muddled into an arrogant belief that the people who died because of him died for the greater good. But as he learns the truth behind his Titan powers, and how the powers he has weren't even earned by him, this belief gets shaken. He breaks, realizing how he led hundreds to their deaths without any guarantee that the hearts they gave would be of any meaning. Since the beginning of the story, ever since he saw Keith's pathetic apology to Moses' mother, Eren wanted to join the Survey Corps. He wanted to achieve something and keep moving forward in the name of those who sacrificed themselves, so that he could give meaning to their loss. If nobody takes their jobs, then all their deaths would be of no meaning. When he saw Keith accepting his failures, or when he saw Hannes accepting his cowardness, he must have thought something like, I am not gonna be like them. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be someone strong who never has to look this pathetic. I'm going to be different. Eren feels pathetic because he couldn't change anything. He feels he wasn't special. Humanity was still in the same position as it was at the beginning of the story, with nothing to show for any soldier's sacrifice. But that wasn't it. He idealized people like Levi and wanted to become everyone's hope. By becoming someone special, he wanted the people around him to accept him. He started thinking that doing what the whole world acknowledges as great would make his own life meaningful. And because of this, bit by bit, his unshakable confidence starts breaking. He couldn't disprove those who didn't trust in the Survey Corps. He wasn't able to stand up to his own expectations of himself, and he loses trust in himself. Maybe he isn't meant to be the one to eradicate Titans. After all, he isn't even part of the chosen bloodline. He isn't anyone special.
私はエレンを食って姉さんを取り返す。そして世界の歴史を継承し、この世から巨人を駆逐する。それが私の使命よ。
I would like to emphasize that there's actually a lot more going on in this scene that I would love to talk about, but I also want to add that thinking about the length of this video has been the major source of my insomnia for the entirety of June. Trust is a massive topic in AOT. To put it on a scale, it would be 3 to 4 times more loaded than the topic of choice. Without a doubt, it would be the longest chapter in Barry's textbook of Advanced Understanding of Attack on Titan syllabus 2. Okay, so getting back to topic, we can see a similarity, a common theme here. And it's a recurring one if you look at the entirety of this series. That is the concept of placing the greater good above everything else. doing the right thing, valuing one's duties over themselves, and that being seen as respectable. In terms of the show itself, a spirit of self-sacrifice, a common understanding among the general consensus that one should always act righteously. The greater good taking over the lack of one's own inner morality. It is hard to explain what exactly I'm referring to, but it's basically wanting to always be objectively correct. All this is subconsciously fueled by an inner want to be accepted, or maybe due to pure ignorance, or maybe even because of a misunderstanding that being special gives some sort of meaning to your lives. And I can further dig into this with how we see certain character arcs, like Armin's for example, about not wanting to be a bother, but let's stay focused here. So, on realizing that him being a Titan actively hurts humanity as a whole, Eren tries to do the right thing. All this puts enough mental strain on Eren that he pushes all his responsibilities onto Historia and tells her to eat him, for the sake of the greater good. Those days he remembers fondly, those dreams that mean so much to him, none of that should have happened in the first place. He never deserved any of it. For the greater good, he himself should have never happened. And similarly, on the other hand, we have Historia. She's being given a mission to inherit the founder and eradicate the Titans. Of course this is a lie, but even after somewhat realizing that, she still tries to do the right thing. In her mind, that's her duty. That's what she should do. She wants to feel special, and she wants to be seen as a hero. Not by someone in particular, but in her own sense of objectivity. Both their actions are, in ways, driven by an underlying want to appeal to the greater good, and to do the right thing based upon their preconceived notions, but Eren's is rather subtle or hidden deep, while Historia's is a lot more exaggerated. And that is understandable, given her backstory. Like, even before, back in Season 2, we see her pretending to be so nice that she would even sacrifice herself for the sake of saving someone. And Ymir catches her bluff. It's not that she wants to save the other cadet no matter what, it's that she wants to appear like she does. Her choice is selfish. Deep down, she just wants to look like a victim. She just wants to be seen as a tragic hero who died while protecting someone else. She lacks the actual resolve to protect that someone, and is ready to sacrifice others and even herself if that would make her special. And so, in Season 3, she forces herself to believe that the only choice humanity has is to do nothing but pray. Thinking like that, it's easier for her to fool herself of her freedom. To make the simple choice that she's being given.
お前、いいことしようとしてるだろ。クリスタ、お前の生き方に口出しする権利は私にはない。だからこれはただの私の願望なんだがな。お前、胸張って生きろよ。
Ultimately, Historia makes an honest decision. She doesn't need to be someone special for humanity or appeal to anyone or anything at the cost of her own freedom to live the way she wants to. Her right to live a life that she would be proud of. She doesn't care if her choice was the right thing to do or not. She simply didn't want to make a choice that she would end up regretting. It's just that simple. She doesn't want to sacrifice herself any longer for a reason she doesn't understand, simply because that would be the right thing to do. And so, Historia throws away Eren's chains, yells how she hates humanity, and even calls Eren out. Exterminating the Titans? What a pain in the ass. Who would volunteer to do something like that? The vow to eradicate the Titans. Now, more specifically, this goal of saving the world originates not from what Eren truly feels, but from his impractical and childish mindset combined with the self-hate caused by it. Like how he thinks that the savior of humanity must be some perfect beacon of hope and not just an average nobody like him. He guilts himself into thinking that it was wrong for him to ever accept his Titan powers, even though he himself always hated the Titans, and tells himself that that's what a weak person would do. Because according to him, logically, from an objective stance, his actions are contradictory, that he's being a hypocrite. Basically, his morality slowly turns into that of Twitter user Eren Jaeger. It's because that's what he has learned from the society around him, that special people exist and average men can't achieve anything. He's burdened under the weight of not only the expectations of everyone else, but even to those that now belong to him. He feels a sense of obligation to the world, and because of it, he wants to be judged for all his mistakes, as well as feels a need to atone for them. It is because of that sense of obligation and inferiority to others that indirectly makes him care about becoming someone special.
If everyone is not special, maybe you can't be what you want to be. それぞれのことへいつかに
Oh, wait, sorry, wrong show.
特別じゃなきゃいけないんですか？私はそうは思いませんよ。少なくともこの子は偉大になんてならなくてもいい。人より優れていなくたって。だって見てくださいよ。こんなに可愛い。
Until he lets go of that point of view, until he learns to make choices of his own, not attempts at being objectively correct fighting for the greater good, but ones that would truly be his own, he can never really be free. I mean, just think about it. You cannot force yourself into a mold and also hope to live your life freely. The statue of Hellas, sure heroic, is also simultaneously empty from the inside. The choice for freedom diverges from that idealistic mold of what a hero is. It is also another selfish choice. And actively making this selfish choice is difficult for Eren because, like we have established, just like Levi, Eren is afraid of making the wrong choice. Which brings us back, here, to the collapsing underground. Eren knows that he needs to do something, but instead he resorts to thinking that there is nothing he can do, nowhere left for him to go, and apologizes for it. He does have an idea, but automatically pushes it away, fearing the regret he will face in case it fails. He's afraid to face that responsibility. Instead, just like we saw with Historia a few moments prior, he forces himself to think that there is no other options left for him. That is, until he is asked, is it better to do nothing? Should they all simply wait and accept their deaths? Is that what Eren honestly wants? Because either way, the choice is his to make. And to be pretty fucking honest, he would rather not see his comrades die in front of him again.
ごめんなさい。最後に一度だけ許してほしい。自分を信じることを。
Eren cannot accept doing nothing, waiting for his end to arrive, because that's how strong his desire to live is. It is his inherent character, his honest self. The part of him that pushes him to act no matter the circumstances. That is just how he was born. To quote Levi, no matter what cage he is put in, no matter how he is restrained, nothing can tame his willpower. He truly is a real monster. Rather than doing nothing, Eren would much rather take the risk and make a gamble with his life at stake. So he stands up, runs forward, ready to transform, making a choice while believing in his own feelings. He starts being honest to his own wants, and just for this once, tries trusting in himself. Yeah, I'm not. That word fucking scares me. I'm not gonna use it. To quote Sasha's father from a scene in Sasha's backstory, no one would throw away their own lives just to protect their identities. In the context of the scene, even if he has to give up his traditions and who he is, he still wants to live. Because living in this world is a privilege, because it is something special, it is not something that he can sacrifice. In other words, he's afraid of dying. Everyone is. None of the scouts marching towards their deaths felt how noble their sacrifices would be. In the end, they all felt fear. They all felt regret. It is that fear of death and regret that, when someone is forced to make a choice, pushes them to avoid responsibilities and to abandon their ancestry, their own morality, and even their own wants, their desires. And they're not wrong in doing that. After all, fear is a survival instinct. People afraid of Eren just wanted to survive. Marleyans are afraid of Eldians because they pose a threat to them. Whenever someone's life is in danger, their minds get clouded with fear. So, what can fight that fear? Where can that strength come from? Well, I think the actual answer that the show gives us, and I'm not joking here, is that the strength comes from screaming. I'm not kidding, let me explain. Even though explaining something like the metaphoric role of screaming in Attack on Titan sounds difficult, at least without going extremely off topic, I kind of viscerally understand the point that Isayama was trying to make here. It is something internal. To scream within your heart, that strength to temporarily overcome fear and go beyond it, comes the strongest in times of desperation, for the sake of desires.
なんでか知らねえけど、俺は自由を取り返すためなら、そう、力が湧いてくるんだ。
Someone's desire for something, their honest wants, or what can even be called their dreams. In Attack on Titan, this desire is the only thing truly inherent about a person. Case in point, Eren's monstrous desire for freedom. And for the sake of a desire that strong, comes an inner strength to fight for it. The first paragraph from the Return to Shiganshina arc in the manga tells us that what fuels this strength differs person to person. Some scream from pride, some are filled with hope, and some are filled with rage. For example, someone like Flock, after the Erwin charge, feels that he survived like a coward. And to disprove that by giving his life some sort of a purpose, he is pushed by his pride. On the other hand, Armin is filled with hope and courage when he thinks about the ocean. To quote a line from the theme song of Levi's OVA, you sing with hope, and the fear will be gone. In the case of Eren though, his strength comes from his rage, his hatred, his anger, and because of that rage, he can fight for his dream even after being faced with the ubiquitous fear of death and regret. That fear which comes with making a choice. Not avoid it, mind you, everyone feels that fear in front of death, but simply overcome it as he himself puts his life ablaze. After all, nobody knows the outcome of a choice. Compared to those who choose to simply survive for no purpose, Eren, who lights his own life on fire for running after his dreams, is, in an odd way, much more alive. I'm not doing a great job explaining myself. I know, since I'd have preferred to use a much more mathematical approach towards this topic, but I feel for now they get the point across. To quote Hanji, if you really want to understand something you don't know, then just find it out. There's plenty of a reason to put your life on the line for that. For Eren, his own life is secondary to his incredible hunger for freedom. Better than fearing pain and doing nothing, no matter just how much he is suffering, Eren would still take a gamble even at the cost of the very thing he's chasing, if there's something, anything he can do to attain it. Children will cling to their very last coins. He has always been this simple-minded, and kind of suicidal. That is just how strong his desire is. All this culminates beautifully in one of my all-time favorite scenes ever, the final scene in the episode, appropriately titled Scream. Those who cannot sacrifice their everything can't hope to achieve anything. If you don't fight, you cannot win. What matters is that will to fight, that instinct to retaliate. Because even without a perfect game plan or any clear course of action, if the last thing you'd want to accept is to sit on your ass and do nothing, then the best you can do is to think on your feet as you push forward. And when you finally see a glimmer of hope, a plan to fight back for what you want the most, your only choice is to stick to it no matter the cost. In case that the path to your dream is a path filled with corpses, if the cost is your very humanity, then those sins are what shall drive you. Until you can pay back to those you have sinned, until you can atone to them and shoulder the responsibility of your choice, until you bring their forced sacrifice to fruition, you have to keep pushing forward. Even if that cost is your dream, till your fight isn't over, you must gamble on it as you fight, screaming within your heart. If we step back just because we lack the strength, then when are we ever going to win? To quote Erwin, when an enemy closes in, you don't hide with a shield, but step forward and attack with a spear. If that moment never comes, running away will only lead to pointless losses. The lives lost thus far would be meaningless. After all, every choice gains a meaning after the next one. Stuck in that path, the only thing you can do is to entrust your dream onto someone close to you. That is the sole way to rebel against the cruel world. In case I didn't make it obvious, I'm talking about the events of Season 3 Part 2 that run in 3 to 4 prominent character arcs, parallel to each other and sort of lead to these implications. I'd honestly love to thoroughly analyze every single one of these scenes word by word, so tell me if you'd want to see that, cause then I'd be a bit more motivated to make them. I'm gonna make them regardless, it's just if you tell me to, I'll probably enjoy the process a bit more. Frankly, this entire section of the story is so dense that I can't possibly do it any sort of justice right now. But one thing I find really interesting is the direction that Eren's character begins to take somewhere around here. Part of what makes this scene so powerful for Eren is that here he's fighting for the wrong choice. A choice that is not for the greater good, and yet he isn't able to give up. Even till the very end, in fact. He's simply forced to accept Armin's death as an outcome for the greater good. And in that moment, finding himself completely powerless, he honestly admits that all this time, his reasons for fighting weren't to see the outside world, or the ocean, or any of that crap. Fundamentally, while vowing to eradicate the Titans, in the original Ippiki no Kuros moment, all he felt was hatred. That is his true self. Nothing noble, nothing that fits his image of a hero, and nothing that he would consider right. He argues that someone like Armin fits the role of humanity's savior much better than... What the fuck is this? What is this? The basement reveal... Thanks for the massive support, by the way. The basement... the basement reveal, other than just being so freaking good, also hammers down a rather important concept for Eren. Eren, who had been forgetting his true instinct while chasing behind the righteous, it tells him that the right or wrong he has been so fixated upon doesn't even exist.
この世に真実などない。それが現実だ。誰だって神でも悪魔にでもなれる。誰かがそれを真実だと言えばな。
Nothing is inherently right or wrong. Nobody is really special. Nothing is good or evil. Everything is manipulated, and everything depends upon the point of view. I'm sorry, my throat's going really tired. I mean, for example, aren't Historia and Zeke exactly in the same situations, and don't they make the exact same choices? They both betray their parents and the responsibilities they were being pushed into, and choose to protect themselves. And yet we celebrate one's choice and hate on the others. The actual fact of the matter is, the righteousness that Eren has been chasing is nothing more than an illusion of his surroundings. After all, everything he thought he had done for the greater good of mankind was, in fact, not the case. What Eren doesn't understand is that his goal isn't to be the savior of humanity, it is to fight for his freedom. And now that I've taken an excruciatingly long time to define terms like fear, an honest choice, a spirit of self-sacrifice, dreams, etc. in the context of the show, I can finally get into the last section of this video. about the time when Eren lost this true self of his, with his dream seeming impossibly far away, when freedom is nowhere in sight.
だから今死にたくない者は力を貸してほしい。
お前と同じで
どうか一緒に未来を生きてほしい。
Season 4 sends every aspect of Eren's character into overdrive. His complexity as a character and nuance becoming so much that you physically cannot talk about all of it. This season solidified him as my personal favorite character of all time, probably. The sequence of events surrounding the declaration of war, that is the Marley arc, also stands out in particular as some of the most impressive pieces of storytelling that I have ever seen. Not to mention the entire beast that is Season 4 Part 2. I'll not cover that in this video. The tension in the conversation between Reiner and Eren, the questions the viewers have, the sheer stakes of the choices and the ambiguity of the intentions behind them all come together in a crescendo of what can only be described as a legendary as fuck scene. But even more impressively, and in relation to the topics of this video, these events also stand as Eren's confrontation with himself. Like, we see something similar happen with Historia and more importantly Pastor Nick during the events of Season 2. He says that he wants to assess the real situation with his own eyes and then judge if he could stay true to his own principles. And for that, he decides to go to see the impacts of the supposed wall breach. Maybe because the only one he can trust are his own eyes. And to do that, he even accompanies the Survey Corps, who are seen as the adversaries to their religion. Somebody like Gross, for example, admits that in his head he keeps a virtual barrier between himself and the aliens that makes it easier for him to, you know, do gross stuff. But unlike him, Nick just wants to see the truth. He doesn't want to fool himself any longer. He wants to be honest. And in that scene, when he looks at that crowd, he has somewhat of a change of heart. Just to shy away from following through with anything in the end from the burden of a choice. And when Eren goes to Marley, he's put in the same position. Okay, look at it this way. Both Eren's intentions for going to Marley and what he experiences after living there are exactly the same as those of another characters in a previous section of the story. Like I said, every character's arc in the show intersects with Eren's at one point or the other. He no longer wants to remain powerless and do nothing. He too wants to see the real situation, up close, and on doing so, he too has a change of heart in his own right. He feels bad for the people living there and realizes that the walls and what lied beyond them were both the same. Damaged minds and bodies, their freedoms taken away, even losing their own identities. Nobody would make a choice knowing such an outcome. But most people are pushed into this hell by something. That something isn't their choice, it is out of their reach. It is either their situation or someone else that forces them to act. But precisely because it is out of their control, in the end, they can have no regrets. They're victims themselves. No matter what they have done, they can't be blamed for it. By others or even by themselves, they wouldn't be in the wrong. So, in a way, not having a choice to make is comfortable. But there are also people who push themselves into that hell. Those people are after something that lies beyond that hell. To grasp it, they must first plunge into darkness, and there is still a chance that instead of seeing the light of hope, they might just end up in a worse hell than before. A hell where they're forever pained by regret. The outcome of a choice like this is uncertain. To be frank, it's just a gamble. But in order to find out, in order to do something, they must move forward. I feel a lot of people misinterpret Eren's character here. He doesn't say all this to Falco because he's an all-knowing being who finally understands the truth about this world, or because he has developed into the ultimate badass. He says it because he's afraid. Try to get into Eren's mind right now, alright? The want for freedom that had actually driven him this far, that freedom now feels unattainable. I'll go into depth about what his freedom really even means someday later, partly because I don't even know myself, like how a line in the new ending song mentions that his freedom would mean nothing without a place to return to, his home, symbolized by the character of Mikasa pretty much, and even counting in his behavior from when he couldn't give up on Armin, etc., But the way the world is, that freedom of his has been completely locked away. And in order to change the world, whatever the fuck his plan is, I don't know right now, he has to gamble on that freedom, and even then the chances of actually winning are next to none. If anything, he will just end up suffocating under the responsibilities of those he would have sinned. Making a choice like that will surely lead to nothing but regret. After all, he can look into the future. Looking around him, he sees how scary regret can be, and he lacks the courage to make a choice that he knows he would end up regretting. The line that hits this idea really hard is when Eren's grandfather tells him to go spend time with his family, why do something that would leave him with nothing but regret. Essentially, he has been soft-locked. And realizing that his dream will never be fulfilled, thinking that he has no other choice but to sit and do nothing as he waits for his end, realizing that his life will end in such a meaningless way, pains him enough to the point where he'd want to die and simply end that pain. In a desperate attempt to give any sort of meaning to his life, he tries to fulfill his duty as the savior of humanity. He tries to become a tragic hero. Or maybe when faced with this much suffering, he somewhat starts believing in the whole philosophy of not being born is the greatest salvation. Whatever it is, he thinks about following through with Zeke's euthanization plan. But what I like about Eren's character, and what I think also makes him rather unique, is that his mental state for the savior of humanity is ugly. Or I guess the better term for that would be miserable. That is because nobody wants to give up on their dreams and die. His mental state is a constantly bouncing ping ball between what he thinks would be meaningful or meaningless and what he really wants. According to what he sees in the future, his fight for his desires would definitely have a completely meaningless ending. But without fighting for his freedom, he also lacks any sort of driving force. So he talks to someone who he can empathize with, someone who needs to hear what he himself needs to hear. When he sees Falco depressed over not being able to do a thing, Eren sees a glimpse of himself in him. He talks to Falco, intending that what he says ends up inducing the same effect on his own self, saying what he himself heard from Reiner out loud so that he can understand the true weight of those words. In that scene, he's equal parts talking to Falco as he's talking to himself. Seeing Falco ready to sacrifice himself for something he wants to protect, that inspires him. In a way, talking to Falco saves him. The way I see it, Eren isn't an edgelord, but on the inside, he's weak. He is desperate. I always wondered what was Eren's reasoning for talking to Reiner. I mean, what would he even gain out of it? But I feel I kind of get it now. He wants to understand himself, and for that, he confronts someone similar to him, someone who has done the same things that he is about to do. He confronts Reiner, and in that process, also confronts himself. And the result? When Eren purposefully tries to suggest Reiner as a victim of his circumstances, much like how Zeke pushes the idea that Eren is also a brainwash victim, Reiner breaks down. He falls onto his knees, apologizing as he confesses that his actions were selfish. His actions weren't caused by his history or circumstances, he had been pushing his own back. From this, Eren learns that all his actions weren't caused because of others either, it was all caused by his own selfish desires. Those are the choices he would have made no matter what. He has always been just him. They both have always been just them, ever since they were born. And because of his choices, Reiner was now stuck under the weight of his sins. Sins he could never atone for. Regrets that drive him insane. To Eren, this must remind him of that phrase, "Why leave yourself with nothing but regret?"
If Eren does what he wants to, if he acts honestly, then he will reach the prophesized bad end. And like what he learns, if he's acting from his free will, then that makes him responsible for his actions and thus vulnerable to regret.
Reiner's reaction shows him the result of the gamble he's about to make. The worst hell filled with nothing but regret. It is scary. Nobody would make a choice knowing such an outcome. The outcome is right in front of him. Fear takes hold of Eren once again. Until it all finally clicks. The reason that being soft-logged out of his freedom pains Eren so much, to the point where he'd want to vanish and simply end this misery, is because deep down, he honestly just wants to live.
もう嫌だと自分が俺を殺してくれ。ですが私は死にたくありません。それは私がこの世に生まれてきてしまったからです。
Eren finally sees a ray of hope beyond his hell. It is in that moment when his monstrous desire for freedom returns. He doesn't have a plan to fulfill his goal, but he's going to make the choice that he honestly wants to. Even if there's no meaning in it, he has the right to be honest to himself because he was born into this world. He will give his own meanings to his actions because he was given a chance. And in that case, the best he can do is to come up with a plan on his feet. He will not accept simply doing nothing because if you don't fight, you cannot win. If you cannot sacrifice your everything, you also can't hope to achieve anything. He fights with his life and the lives of those he cares about both on the line for the sake of those lives. The strength to make such a gamble comes when he thinks about fighting for his freedom, as his rage overcomes his fear, as he metaphorically, or even literally, screams. Just like he did in Chapter 2, Chapter 10, Chapter 50, and once again in Chapter 100. He fully intends to fight the entire world and even come back alive. In a way, that choice is suicide. But if there's no desire to come back out alive, you're zero. Okay, I'll stop. That's how much courage his immense desires provide him with, while he makes the choice to move forward until his enemies are destroyed. To make a choice that he knows he would regret. To make a choice that he doesn't want to regret. Not this either. Yes, to make a choice without the fear of regret. That is the choice of Eren Jaeger. And the outcome of that choice, well, that is something we have yet to see. And that's the video. Making this took me a lot of effort. It was an actual nightmare and took me more time than anything I'm happy admitting. But I seriously hope you guys enjoyed it. A quick little update for people who actually care. This video isn't my comeback to being fully active again quite yet, because I haven't been uploading because life has been busy, and as a student, I'm at a critical point where every one of my upcoming exams is something I want to focus on. For the next 5 to 6 months, I'll try to distance myself from making videos as much as possible. But in case I get some free time and make a video, it'll be based on one of these 6 animes. Little something to look forward to, I guess. Also, the final season part 2 is currently airing and I'm loving every bit of it. You can come on over, follow me on Twitter, because I'm actually more active there. And with all that said, I don't have much more to say. I'm not gonna bore you. That's all from me. I have to say see ya. Hope to see you soon.